All right, so let's jump into this Bharti Airtel Q3 report, fiscal year 2025.
Okay.
You've shared with me their full audited results,
Yes.
both consolidated and standalone,
Yes.
and that's quite a bit to unpack.
Indeed.
Looks like we're going to try to get a clear picture of how the company performed this quarter and maybe get some hints about their future direction.
Absolutely.
So right off the bat, their revenue growth jumps out at you.
Yeah.
It's 19.1% year over year, and that's driven by both India and Africa.
That's right.
That's pretty significant in such a competitive market.
It is very significant. Yeah. It's, in a market like the telecom market, which is very, very competitive, to see that kind of growth is quite impressive.
So what's behind this growth? Is it just, a rising tide lifting all boats, or is Bharti Airtel doing something special here?
Well, it's probably a combination of factors, but their strategic moves certainly stand out.
Mm-hmm.
I think, they're seeing a lot of momentum in mobile data, particularly in India,
Okay.
which suggests that their network investments are paying off.
Right.
They've added thousands of new towers and mobile broadband stations.
Wow.
But it's more than just infrastructure.
I was going to say, what else is going on? What else are they doing to stand out?
Well, they're making some interesting technological plays. For example, they rolled out this AI-powered anti-spam tool that's making a real difference for their customers.
Oh, wow.
So they're identifying over 1 million unique spammers every day,
1 million?
providing relief to millions of users. Yeah.
Wow, that's a detail that sticks with you.
It does.
They're not just talking about customer experience. They're actually going out and improving it with technology.
Exactly. And it positions them as innovators,
Yeah.
which matters in a market where customers have a lot of choices.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's zero in on their India performance for a second.
Okay.
Their revenue growth there was even more impressive, a whopping 24.6% year over year.
Wow, that is substantial.
It is.
What's driving that specifically?
Well, a couple things. First, their average revenue per user, or ARPU, jumped to Rs 245, way up from Rs 208 last year.
Okay.
This suggests that they're attracting and retaining high-value customers,
Yeah.
maybe premiumizing their offerings, as they call it.
So they're not just going for volume, they're going for quality subscribers too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that reflected in their customer base growth?
It is. Their postpaid segment in particular has shown remarkable growth.
Okay.
They added 0.6 million postpaid customers just this quarter,
Wow.
solidifying their leadership in that segment.
That's very interesting. So they're really shaping their subscriber base.
Yeah.
Now, are they just sticking with mobile, or are they branching out into other segments?
They are branching out. Their home services business is seeing significant growth, fueled by the expansion of their fixed wireless access.
Okay.
They've also added ZEE5 to their content offerings,
Let's see.
providing more value to their home service customers. So it's a smart move to compete with other entertainment providers.
Right. So they're creating an ecosystem, not just a standalone service.
That's right.
Now, we can't talk about Bharti Airtel without mentioning their presence in Africa.
Right.
Their revenue growth there was also pretty impressive.
It was Airtel Africa also saw strong revenue growth.
Okay.
And Nigeria seems to be a key driver of that. They implemented some tariff adjustments there, which were approved by the Nigerian Communications Commission.
Okay.
They see Nigeria as a market with enormous potential.
That's a strong statement.
It is.
So they're betting big on Nigeria's future.
They are.
Are there any specific actions that kind of back up this confidence?
Well, they have this second share buyback program in Africa,
Okay.
which signals confidence in their future prospects and a willingness to return value to shareholders.
Okay.
But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of this whole report is the Indus Towers factor.
Right. The consolidation of Indus Towers, effective November 19th, 2024, has really shaken things up in how they report their financials.
It has.
For those who aren't familiar, can you give us a quick breakdown of what Indus Towers is and how it fits into all of this?
Sure. Indus Towers owns and operates telecom towers.
Okay.
And through a series of transactions, it became a subsidiary of Bharti Airtel.
I see.
So this consolidation obviously has a ripple effect on how they present their financials.
And speaking of ripples, there's this situation with one of Indus Tower's large customers who is facing financial trouble.
Right.
The report does say that Indus believes that they will recover the money owed.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Definitely something to keep an eye on because that could impact Bharti Airtel down the line.
Absolutely.
Now, before we get into the really, really detailed numbers, there's this whole Vodafone share release and sale,
Yes.
which seems pretty complex.
It is a little bit.
Can you break that down for us?
So Vodafone essentially held shares in Bharti Airtel as part of a security package.
Okay.
They released this pledge, and then they sold those shares.
Okay.
The proceeds were used in two ways. Vodafone used a portion to acquire shares in another company, and Bharti Airtel used a portion to settle some master service agreement dues.
So it's kind of a multi-layered financial maneuver.
It is.
Sounds like Bharti Airtel is making some strategic moves to strengthen their financial position.
They are.
But let's actually look at the numbers now.
Got it.
Let's get into the consolidated statement of income and see what story that tells us.
Sounds good.
Okay, so starting with revenue, they reported a total of Rs 45,129 crore for the quarter.
Right.
That's a 19.1% increase compared to the same quarter last year.
That's right.
But it's important to remember that this includes revenue from Indus Towers now.
Yeah, that's right. This consolidated figure reflects their new structure.
Okay.
But to get a clearer picture of their core profitability, they're highlighting a new metric, EBITDA, which stands for EBITDA after leases.
EBITDA.
Yeah, EBITDA.
What is the reasoning behind using this new metric?
It provides a more real picture of profitability by treating lease obligations as expenses.
Okay.
So it acknowledges the impact of these obligations on their bottom line.
That makes sense. They want to be transparent about their financial performance.
That's right.
So what does this EBITDA look like for the quarter?
Well, their EBITDA for the quarter was Rs 24,880 crore with a margin of 55.1%.
Okay.
And their EBITDA margin stands at 55.5%.
Okay.
So this new metric helps to contextualize their earnings, considering these lease obligations.
So even with the inclusion of leases as expenses, their profitability is still quite strong.
Yeah, it is.
Now, what about EBIT and net income for the quarter?
Their EBIT came in at Rs 11,832 crore with a margin of 26.2%.
Okay.
That's naturally lower than their EBITDA margin due to depreciation and amortization expenses.
Okay, and finally, their net income.
They reported a net income of Rs 25,302 crore for the quarter.
Okay.
However, it's crucial to point out that this includes significant exceptional items,
Okay.
primarily related to the consolidation of Indus Towers.
So to get a clear understanding of their true earnings, we need to look beyond that headline figure.
That's exactly right.
Got it. So we'll get into that next.
Okay. Yeah.
But before we move on, I want to highlight something interesting in the report.
Okay.
There's this detail about Malawi's hyperinflation
Oh, right.
and how it's affecting Airtel's operations there.
Yeah, that's quite interesting.
It is.
Airtel's Malawi operations have switched to hyperinflationary accounting due to the country's economic situation.
Yeah.
So it highlights the complexities of operating in these diverse global markets.
It really does. It shows how they're having to adapt to all these challenges.
Absolutely.
Now, another detail I thought was worth mentioning is the auditor's opinion
Yes.
on both the consolidated and standalone financial results.
That's an important one.
Both sets of results received unmodified opinions,
Unmodified.
meaning the auditors found no material misstatements.
That's right.
This is a good sign for investors because it gives them confidence in the accuracy of the information presented.
Absolutely. It's
Wow.
always reassuring to see that.
Now, I did notice something peculiar. It seems one associate's financial information was audited by a different firm.
That's right.
However, the main auditors made it clear that this didn't affect their overall opinion.
Okay, good.
All right, so we've covered kind of the top-level numbers.
Yes.
Now let's take a look at some of the other details in the report
Yeah, let's dive in.
that paint a fuller picture of Bharti Airtel's financial health.
Okay.
I think it'll give us a much better understanding of their financial strength and their strategic direction.
Absolutely.
So beyond the income statement, what other details are there that we should look at?
Well, there's this thing called operating free cash flow.
Operating free cash flow.
Yeah. It shows how much cash the company generates from its operations after, essential expenses,
Okay,
things like network upkeep and things like that.
gotcha.
Bharti Airtel's operating free cash flow this quarter was Rs 106,043 crore.
That sounds like a lot.
It's very substantial.
What does that tell us? What's the significance of a big number like that?
Well, it means they have a lot of cash coming in, which is really important for growth.
Okay.
They can use that cash to invest in new technologies, expand their network, maybe acquire other companies,
Right.
all without having to rely on a ton of debt.
Speaking of debt, how much debt do they have?
Their net debt, not including those leases we talked about,
Right.
is currently Rs 1,924,538 crore.
Okay.
But you have to look at that number in context.
Right.
You can't just look at the debt number itself.
How do we put it in context?
Well, we have to compare it to their earnings.
Okay.
And that brings us to that net debt to EBITDA ratio we mentioned before.
Right. EBITDA, that's the one that takes those lease obligations into account.
Exactly.
Okay.
That ratio tells you how easily they can handle their debt.
Right.
Based on how much they're earning.
Okay.
So for Bharti Airtel, that ratio is currently at 1.56 times.
And that's considered healthy.
That's a pretty healthy ratio.
Yeah. Yeah.
No red flags there.
Doesn't seem like it.
Okay, good. So it looks like they're managing their debt pretty responsibly.
Yeah, I'd say so. Now let's talk about those capital expenditures.
Right.
They spent a good chunk of change this quarter.
They did.
Ours 118,326 crore.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
What are those expenditures going towards?
This is where you see how serious they are about growing in the future.
Okay.
That money is being spent on upgrading their network, investing in new infrastructure,
Right.
basically making sure they stay on the cutting edge of technology.
So they're planting seeds now to reap bigger rewards later.
Exactly. They're playing the long game.
Now, I know you said the report goes into even more detail.
It does.
What else is in there?
Well, if you're really a numbers geek,
Yeah.
you can dive into the segmentized breakdowns.
Okay.
They have all the numbers for each part of their business.
So like,
Mobile services,
okay.
home services, all of that.
Wow.
So you can really zoom in on whichever areas you're most interested in.
So we've got all this financial data,
Right.
but I think it's time to step back a bit.
Yeah.
What's the bigger picture here? What does it all mean for Bharti Airtel?
Well, I think the overarching story here is one of growth.
Growth.
Not just growth in size, but growth in how well they're executing their strategy, their expansion in India and Africa.
Right.
Their focus on getting those high-value customers.
Right.
Their investments in both infrastructure and technology.
Right.
It all suggests they're playing the long game.
Very strategic.
Very strategic.
And they're doing all this while being smart about their money.
That's right. Their financials are solid.
Strong cash flow.
Yeah.
Healthy debt levels.
Yeah.
Committed to making those investments.
That's a winning combination.
It seems like they're not just chasing short-term profits.
No, they're building something for the long haul.
But of course, there are always challenges.
Right, there always are.
What could potentially get in their way?
Well, the competition is always fierce in this industry.
Telecom.
Yeah, both in India and in Africa.
Okay.
Well, globally, really.
Right.
We can't forget about the government regulations either, especially in India with that new Telecommunications Act.
Yeah, we touched on that earlier.
How well they adapt to those new rules is going to be really important.
And then there's that issue with the Indus Towers client,
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
the one having financial problems.
You had to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, if they were to default, that could have a domino effect
Exactly.
on Indus Towers and ultimately on Bharti Airtel, too.
It's all connected.
So it seems like there's smooth sailing ahead, but also some potential storms brewing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But from what we've seen so far,
Yeah.
Bharti Airtel seems pretty well equipped to handle whatever comes their way.
They've shown they can be resilient.
Yeah, they've shown they can adapt.
Yeah.
Now, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier
Okay.
about the changing regulations in India.
The Telecommunications Act.
Yeah, I think that deserves a bit more attention.
It's a big deal.
It is. It's a big deal for Bharti Airtel and for the whole industry.
Absolutely. It introduces a whole new set of rules for everyone.
And it's not just about following the rules.
Right.
It's about understanding how those rules are going to impact their business.
How it'll affect their operations, their investments,
Right.
ultimately whether they can keep growing.
The act covers things like how spectrum is allocated,
Right.
how licensing works, consumer protection.
All important stuff.
So it's not just about adapting to the present.
Yeah.
It's about looking ahead
Anticipating the future.
and making sure they're positioned to thrive in that new environment.
Exactly.
So the big questions are,
Okay.
how is Bharti Airtel going to navigate all of this?
Yeah.
Can they take advantage of the opportunities that come with these new rules?
Right.
Can they avoid the potential pitfalls?
Mm-hmm.
Can they keep this momentum going even with tougher regulations and more competition?
Those are the million-dollar questions.
They really are. And the answers are going to determine what the next chapter looks like for Bharti Airtel.
Absolutely.
Now, I think there's a bigger theme here, too.
What's that?
This isn't just about Bharti Airtel. Okay. The Indian government is making a real push to create a more regulated digital space.
They are.
One that prioritizes national security,
Yeah.
consumer privacy, the stability of all that important infrastructure.
It's a big shift.
It is, and it's going to have a huge impact on how companies like Bharti Airtel operate.
For sure.
They can't just focus on growing their business and making profits anymore.
Oh,
They have to take all of this into account.
absolutely.
They have to make sure they're aligned with the government's vision.
For a secure and responsible digital India.
Exactly.
So we have to acknowledge that even though Bharti Airtel has done really well this quarter,
Yeah.
the future is full of both opportunities and
Right.
challenges.
And they're going to have to find a way to balance those two.
Yeah, navigate the present while keeping an eye on what's coming next.
Well said. I think we've really gone deep on this one.
We have.
We've explored Bharti Airtel's financials in depth.
Yeah.
Talked about their strategy, looked at the big picture trends.
Even dug up some interesting tidbits along the way.
Right, like that whole hyperinflation thing in Malawi.
Yeah, and that Vodafone share deal.
That was pretty wild.
It was.
But hopefully you, our listener, have gotten a lot out of this.
Oh, so.
A deeper understanding of Bharti Airtel.
Yeah.
Not just where they are now, but where they might be headed.
And hopefully it sparked some curiosity.
Yeah, it made you want to learn even more about this company and this industry.
Because knowledge is power.
Especially when you go out and find it yourself.
When you dig deep and really try to understand things.
So we encourage you to keep exploring.
Yeah, keep that curiosity going.
Think about the questions we've raised today.
And see if you can find your own answers.
Until next time.
Staying informed.
Stay engaged.
And stay curious.
Yeah, it's interesting how they have to keep all of this in mind while making these business decisions.
Yeah, it's really a balancing act.
They can't just focus on the bottom line.
No, you have to think about the bigger picture.
The government's vision for the digital space. And I think that's smart.
It is. It's proactive.
It's not just reacting to regulations.
No, they're anticipating that.
And making sure they're ahead of the curve.
Which is really the best way to succeed in a rapidly changing environment.
Exactly. It's not just about following the rules.
It's about understanding the intent behind them.
The direction the government is going.
Yeah, where the whole digital space is headed.
And it's about finding opportunities within those changes.
Not just seeing them as obstacles.
But as chances to innovate and grow.
Exactly.
And that makes you think about all the other things that could affect Bharti Airtel in the future.
Oh, yeah. There are so many factors at play.
We talked about financials, regulations, competition,
Right.
but there's also the global economy.
Yeah.
Technology is constantly evolving.
Mm-hmm.
Even social and cultural trends could have an impact.
It's a complex web.
It is, and it's impossible to predict exactly what will happen.
That's for sure.
But that's what makes it so interesting.
It does.
Trying to connect all these dots.
Yeah.
Understand the big trends.
And how they might shape the future.
Exactly. And I think that's what we've tried to do today.
Yeah, makes sense.
We've explored Bharti Airtel's financials pretty thoroughly,
We have.
looked at their strategic decisions,
Yeah.
examined some of those broader trends
Hopefully it's given our listeners a good overview
of not just where the company is now, but where they might be going.
and maybe spark some ideas of their own.
More than just understanding, though.
Yeah.
I hope we've made people curious.
To learn more.
Yeah,
To keep digging.
because ultimately that's what matters.
That thirst for knowledge.
That desire to understand the world around us.
So keep exploring. Keep asking questions.
Don't be afraid to challenge assumptions.
Think critically about the information you encounter.
And most importantly,
Never stop learning.
couldn't have said it better myself.
That's it for this deep dive into Bharti Airtel.
Until next time,
Stay informed
stay engaged.
and stay curious.